Everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days in today's video. Some interesting signals emerging. It looks like high pressure is going to be building over Scandinavia as we go through towards the middle of January, but low pressure is still going to be coming in off the Atlantic. Now, this could potentially end up a very wet scenario next week. We've already had a lot of rain through January. There has been flooding already. If we start getting weather fronts strung out and grinding to a halt over the country next week, coming up against that high pressure, that really could be very, very significant. There could be a lot of flooding in places. So we will have a look at that in a moment. Before I get on with that, though, I just want to talk about the advertising Mez video ads on all my pages at GazworthVids.com. If you hit play on the video ad, you'll be supporting GazworthVids.com. Thanks very much for doing that. So, I thought I'd just start off with what's going on in the United States. Very, very severe freeze-up taking place in the north and the east of the states at the moment. They're talking about the polar vortex really sitting over northeastern and the northern parts of America just at the moment. That's not all that unusual, to be honest, for America. They do get these very cold plunges out of Canada on quite frequent regularity. I think this is the worst sort of freeze-up since around 1994. So it's been quite a while since there's been something quite this significant taking place in the north and the east of the states, but they do have it very cold. Some winters it can get really very severely cold, but this is quite unusual even for them. We've got well, look at this, we've got minus 30 HPA air coming down across the north and the east of the states at the moment. That is very, very severely cold air. And we're going to be seeing maximums across many of those northern eastern cities such as New York, probably not getting much above minus 10 degrees today. So very severe freeze up going on over there in the north and the east of the states right now. I've had a cold winter so far across America, that has helped enhance the jet stream actually coming across the Atlantic, and it's that jet stream that's been driving in these areas of low pressure. So yeah, it is an unusual pattern to have it this severe in the north and the east of the states, but they do get these big freeze-ups. This would be much more significant if it was happening in Europe. It'd be very, very unusual for Europe, but for America, yeah, it's unusual in terms of the severity of the cold, the depth of the cold, but they do get these very severe freezing spells of weather much more frequently than we do in Europe. And talking of Europe, this is today's 10-day temperature anomaly for the next week for the European continent, taking us from the 7th to the 14th of January. And we see most of Europe is going to have another very mild week. We're in these salmon pink colours, so yeah, it's going to be quite a mild week across many parts of Europe. Actually, the coolest anomalies across Ireland and Scotland, and also, not sure if you can pick this out, but across the far north of Norway have got some deeper blue colours appearing across the far north of Norway, and I think this probably heralds the change to colder conditions, certainly for the north of Europe as we go into the middle of January. Those blue colours there just are the start, I think, of the temperature dropping away as we go into the middle of the month. But certainly for the next week, much of the continent will be having a mild week. Now, what's going to happen is that over the weekend we're going to get a build of pressure, so we're going to have a drier weekend across many parts of the United Kingdom. Could be some frost and fog at night. It could be quite chilly by day, with temperatures probably not much above 5 or 6 degrees. But by night it could get quite cold with some frost and fog. But we have got this pressure building in, and eventually this pressure, high pressure, is going to start to ridge up towards Scandinavia as we go towards the start of next week. But at the same time, low pressure is still coming in off the Atlantic. So a bit of a battleground type scenario looks like it's going to take place next week, with the high pressure to the east and the northeast, but low pressure driving in off the Atlantic. There's weather fronts within the flow here producing outbreaks of rain, and those weather fronts, as they come up against that high pressure, are just going to sort of stall and grind to a halt, and could produce the potential for quite a lot of heavy rain across many parts of the country next week. Through the middle of next week, the GFS model wants to bring in another area of low pressure from the southwest. Again, that could bring some really quite heavy rain into the west and the southwest, and that'll push northwards and eastwards through the day on Wednesday, with many places having a very wet spell through to the middle of next week. There's the low pressure essentially just sitting there over the top of England and Wales on Thursday, producing a lot of heavy rain. And there will be an increasing risk of flooding, I think, as we go through next week, if this is right. The high pressure is over Scandinavia, it's close by. There's cold air underneath that high pressure, but really the GFS wants to keep the low pressure in the ascendancy here. Key temperatures, well, they will be cooler than we've been used to, but they'll still be reasonably mild, and the main thing is going to be the outbreaks of rain. As we go through today, 10, Friday the 17th, still the suggestion that low pressure is essentially over the country, producing outbreaks of heavy rain. The ECMWF has that high pressure reaching through the country next weekend, producing the chance of frost and fog. But as we go through to the start of next week, here comes the Atlantic starting to drive in again, bringing more rain on Monday. The ridge of high pressure extending up to the northeast, starting to build up over Scandinavia. There it is, the actual area of high pressure over Scandinavia on Tuesday the 14th. But we're in this westerly flow, and the battle just goes on through the week. Really, another weather system comes in on Wednesday. That will be producing heavy rain, slow moving rain as well, because we're coming up against that area of high pressure. And then as we go through to the end of next week, Thursday the 16th and Friday the 17th, there's no real change. The high pressure's up to the east and the northeast, the low pressure's out in the Atlantic, and in between we've got these weather fronts very much ground to a halt and strung out across the country, producing outbreaks of rain. If this cold air from the high pressure to the east just undercuts a little bit, some of that rain could turn wintry. There's no evidence of it on this morning's ECMWF, but it's not far away from doing that, to be honest. So we've got to be watching out for the chance of the rain turning wintry, particularly the latter stage of next week. But I think it is the rain that's the main story through next week. It's been so wet through January already. We've had another week of heavy rain produced by near stationary weather fronts is going to be very, very significant. And as we go through to the GEM, finally, there's the ridge of high pressure giving us a quieter, cooler weekend with some frost and fog. As we go through to the start of next week, the next area of low pressure is driving in off the Atlantic as the high pressure is going up to Scandinavia. As we go through to the middle of next week, we're in that westerly flow, but more low pressures are driving in off the Atlantic, with the high pressure up to the northeast. Very significant rain coming in off the Atlantic, slow moving rain as well. Eventually though, the GEM, a little bit different. It wants to take that low pressure through England and Wales on Thursday the 16th and have the high pressure win the battle. So as we get through to Friday the 17th, the low pressure is sitting off the coast of East Anglia, and we are in an east to northeasterly flow there. But then the high pressure has taken over across Scandinavia, and look at this, the cold air is coming down across all parts of the country. Now, there isn't much support for the GEM scenario this morning from the GFS, although it's close, or at the ECMWF, although that's close as well. But as I say, we do need to be watching out through next week, particularly the latter stages of next week. But if we start to pull in some colder air from the east and the northeast, we could start to turn some of that precipitation, some of that rainfall wintry. But I think the main story of next week's weather is going to be one of heavy rain from weather fronts coming up against the block of high pressure to the northeast, coming to a standstill, and there will be the risk of flooding because we've already had flooding through January. It's been a very wet start to January. I believe Coventry's had the wettest start to January since 1978. So we have got to be watching out for that wintry precipitation, possibly turning up if the winds get into the east later next week. But the main story is going to be heavy rain, a significant and increasing and ongoing risk of flooding through next week. So not good news for anybody affected by the flooding so far this month. There could be more to come. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. 5-day forecast tomorrow, so come back for that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.